Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dalia Abfel. I'm a teaching assistant at English department, Cairo University, and I also work as a researcher at a feminist organization called the Women in Memory Forum. I was on the non-degree grant program. I stayed 10 months at the University of Arizona in Tucson. I was doing research for my MA thesis where I'm comparing Nubian and Native American literature. I chose to focus my presentation today on visits I made to Native nations there in the States, as well as talk a very small time about my thesis. For me, I had lived in the States before twice, but I had never lived in Arizona before, and I had never even been to a reservation before. So this trip was really an opportunity for me to rediscover America or to see a different side of it that I hadn't seen before and hadn't experienced before. Cultural experiences on tribal lands. Now, the first tribal land I went to is called Tohono O'odham Nation, which was an hour and a half from Tucson. This is it. This is me there. This is me there. Now, Tohono O'odham, because Tucson is on Tohono O'odham and Pasquayapie land, and I was lucky enough to visit the Cultural Museum several times. I visited the community college there, and I also learned a lot about food and sustainability projects there. Other Native nations I visited was Navajo Nation, Hopi, Laguna Pueblo, Acoma. I went to the Santa Fe Southwest Indian Market and Isleta Pueblo. Now, Navajo Nation, I was lucky to visit several times. I went to the Navajo Nation Museum. I learned about the culture of Navajos. I learned about treaties there. Because Navajo Nation in the States, for those of you who don't know, it's the largest in terms of size. I was also lucky to go because for a lot of Native nations, they have sacred places. Window Rock is one of them because you see the little circle there, that's what they call Window. A lot of Navajos believe that this is a place of emergence, place of creation for them. I was also lucky enough to visit Canyon de Chelly, and this is all Navajo land, Canyon de Chelly, and Monument Valley. This is my friend Christina, who's also a Fulbrighter. She's from Germany, and this is all Navajo sacred land. I also took a tour of Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico, and I don't know if you can see it from the picture, but that's a traditional, it's a traditional oven there. And again, I was lucky because our tour guide, his name was Brandon, he was from the Pueblo. He talked about the culture, the tradition, the ceremonies. I learned a lot from that. And we also went to the Southwest Indian Market, which is a huge gathering of many different Native artists from across the states. Because in Southwest you have some specific tribes, but this market allowed me to meet people from tribes in the North, Northwest, Northeast. So I was very lucky with that. I also got to meet a Laguna artist by the name of Marla Allison, and I interviewed her about Laguna life and about her art and how the landscape, because this is the focus of my thesis, how the landscape affects her artwork. And she's standing actually in front of some of her artwork. And Marla was kind enough to introduce me to Lee Marmon. He's a very famous Native photographer who's known as the Blue-Eyed Indian because he's mixed blood, he's also white. And Lee Marmon, incidentally, is the father of the author I'm doing my thesis on, but I didn't get to meet her, unfortunately. And I also got to interview Lee, asking him about Laguna life. And Lee, he's 89 years old, and he was full of so many amazing stories. He got to photograph Hollywood celebrities. Nancy Reagan, former First Lady, asked him to do photo projects at the White House. He had so many stories. He's a bit of a ladies' man too, been married several times. So Lee's just a wealth of knowledge. Lee was really a wealth of knowledge. Another part of the experience I really enjoyed in the States was the opportunity to meet a lot of Native authors because, again, this is the focus of my research and I hadn't had that opportunity before. I met Simon Ortiz, who's from Acoma Pueblo. He was at the University of Arizona where I was Poetry Center, he was giving a reading. I also met Stephen Graham Jones, who's from the Blackfeet Nation at the Native American Literature Reservation. I also met Leanne Howe. Leanha incidentally had lived here in Egypt. She knew some Arabic and she had lived in Jordan and Palestine, I believe. She's from Choctaw Nation. And on the right side, that is Ophelia Zepeda and Larry Evers. Now, Dr. Zepeda was the head of the department, American Indian Studies Department, and she's a very, very big figure in Tohono O'odham Nation. Now, for me, the topic of my thesis, I'm looking at space, place, and movement in the two novels listed here. And being there in the Southwest was very beneficial to me to see the connection that indigenous peoples have with their land in terms of ceremonies, in terms of stories, oral tradition, and what land means to Native people. And since I'm also doing Nubian literature, it was a wonderful opportunity to compare what the land means to both, to indigenous people of America and to Nubians here, and what happens when people are removed from their land. Because as we know, Nubians, التهجير اتعرضوا لي 4 مرات، وبعد كده آخر واحد سنة 67 أظن، هم خسروا الأرض وبعدهم عن النيل وبعدهم عن أرضهم، وهم أصلا كانوا كشعوب كانوا أغلبيتهم فلاحين، فدي أثرت عليهم إزاي. So I looked at how the move لما برضو الأراضي بتاعت النيتيف أمريكانز إن كتير أراضي اتاخدت منهم، وإن إزاي دي بتأثر على هوية الشعوب وثقافات الشعوب، لأن Native Americans كتير بيعتقدوا إن the land is them. They are the land. إن مفيش الانفصال ما بين الاثنين. So this was a great opportunity to compare, to see how being away from the land affects your cultural identity. And I was also lucky enough to present at 2 conferences there, which I hadn't done before. I presented at the Native American Literature Symposium, and I presented at the Department of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Arizona. That's it. Thank you. Questions, or should I go?
Last topic, the paper we had, gender,
Yes.
space, and age of sexual harassment, violence. يعني shed a little bit light on this.
Okay, sure. Because I work at that's my second job at a feminist organization, I'm very interested in gender, very, very interested in gender and feminism. So I did this paper was on, now Shek Magee is a graphic novel or comic, and it's the first.
So familiar with the Nubian tribes here, like
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. I mentioned that in my thesis because Idris Ali, he's Kunuz, yes, it's Idris Ali, he is Kunuz. No, it's just because I wanted to focus my presentation on what I benefited from there, like what I got from there. Because the Kunuz Fadij, I get that here in Egypt, but not there. Not there, yes. Any other questions? Yes. Oh yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.